actually. But I'll be in touch with all my friends and colleagues here. If there's anything I can do, we'll certainly help you
Oh,
out.
thank you very much. But if you don't get tickets, probably we'll be there anyway.
Good.
Just for the party. But I'll look for you. I'll just give you a call and say, Professor, I'm here.
Good. That would be great. One quick thing. I'm so sorry about this, but when you had asked me to present today, which I'm very excited about, I forgot that today is my wife's birthday. And here in Qatar, our weekend is different. Our weekend is Friday and Saturday, and some friends of hers have arranged something. So I can only probably stay for the first hour and 15 minutes.
No problem, Professor. If you don't mind, you'll be the first to speak. So you may leave the room. Okay, no problem.
And if I understand correctly, I'm just going to give a little bit of background of what my path to coming here was and what the opportunities are for prospective attorneys here in Qatar or maybe even in the United States.
Perfect. Excellent.
Okay,
that would be great. I was just talking to Professor Lerhanch. We are scheduling to have ENE Brazil in the second semester because we have been, for long partners, universities, Dom Elder and Applied Science in The Hague. So probably we'll have ENE Brazil, and it will be a pleasure and honor to have you here as well, talking to our Brazilian students.
Terrific. And what do you teach?
I teach international law, procedural law, and procedural constitutional law.
Okay. And if you don't mind me asking, where did you learn to speak English in Brazil, or did you study outside of Brazil?
Well, I learned to speak English in Brazil, but I studied outside. I lived in Germany, where I took a postgrad in European law and German law. Afterwards, I worked for the United Nations in Vienna. I worked for UNCITRAL, the United Nations Commission on International Trade Law. So I spent quite some time in Europe, about 5 years, and I'm Brazilian and Italian as well. So, buona gente.
Well, my wife is she's the director of education for a major hospital here, and she's pursuing a PhD through the University of Pittsburgh that has a satellite hospital in Palermo. So that's where we're going to end our summer this year. She's going to be doing a residency.
Oh my God, that's amazing. If you need any help, I am from Veneto.
Really?
I am from Mantova. Yes, my grandfather was born there in Mantova. But we love Italy. We are planning to go to Italy. We have relatives there who live there who haven't migrated to Brazil. And so it's very nice. It's a marvelous country, and it's completely different from the other countries in Europe. Italians are quite a specific people. There is a special Italian way to live.
It's so funny that you say that because we don't have the official date for my wife's residency yet. They keep saying, oh, maybe the third week of July, the first 2 weeks of August. And we're planners. We need to know.
We're not like that. Yes, no. And never ask for a cappuccino after lunch. Never. Just coffee.
Right.
Professor Matteo Catalano, it's a pleasure to have you here. Welcome.
Actually, it is my pleasure. I'm sorry I wasn't. I hasn't been hearing you. I had this problem in my mic, and now I think I got it through. Professor Lorena, it's an honor to be here. Professor Shala Schurman, I believe it is like that. Professor Aurélien, I believe I've met you.
Yes.
I've met you by video. Mm-hmm. Professor Claire, I believe it's an honor to be here at the Hague University. It's an honor, actually.
Thank you very much, Professor. It's very nice seeing you remotely because it's quite a while since we saw each other in person. Yes. Professor Atalano, Professor Shinuma is my fellow colleague here from Brazil. It's not, here we are now back to our ordinary lives, in-person classrooms, classes, and back to university. But he is from the northeast of Brazil. I am from the southeast, so Brazil is huge. But we had a very pleasant lunch together with our families here in Belo Horizonte. I think it probably 4 months ago.
Yeah, probably that. Maybe more actually.
Yeah.
It is Brazil. It's actually a huge continent. It's amazing the difference, the multicultural difference between me, which I've grown in the north of Brazil, and my family comes from Lebanon, and Lorena family comes from Italy, I believe.
Yes,
And
that's true.
from not
Like
properly
that.
the south. Yeah, not properly the south, but you're I mean in the center of Brazil, I believe. And it's true. We need to rearrange another thing, probably in Europe, maybe. We'll see what times bring us, right?
That's true. Professor Lahange, do you think we may start?
Yeah, we can start.
Professor Torres will be joining us a little bit further because in Peru it's very early. But he told me as soon as possible he will be joining. Okay?
Yeah, we can start. Yeah.
Okay, so let's start. So welcome, professors, Professor Schönman, Professor Mateus, Professor Lahange. Thank you very much for inviting me once more for this very unique panel, which will be dealing with careers outside Europe. And it's been quite a while since I've been a moderator of this panel, and that's why I thank once more Professor Lahange, the Hague University of Applied Science, and the Hague Board of Directors of CAREX Foundation as well. So thank you very much for being here. I welcome all the students, professors, researchers around the world. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning for you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'd like just to introduce briefly our speakers of this panel. We have Professor Charles Schönman. I will be introducing him when he will be speaking, when I give you him the floor. Professor Schönman is from Qatar, and it's the first time we have a Qatar representative in this panel, so this panel is very eminent, very distinguished. My fellow colleague, Professor Mateus Atalanho from Brazil, which I'm very happy to welcome, and which has carried out incredible work here in Brazil as a parliamentary advisor. And also will be joining us a little bit further, Professor Jorge Torres from Peru, which is a fellow colleague and a very experienced professor and law consultant in South America and Latin America in general. So thank you very much. I would like to introduce Professor Schönman. So Professor Schönman, who will be the first one speaking to us all, is a clinical lecturer of law in the Legal Skills Department at Qatar University College of Law. Prior to teaching at Qatar University, Professor Schönman practiced law in the United States and abroad for over 15 years as a legal advisor at the U.S. Federal Communications Commission. He was active in drafting administrative orders related to the digital television transition. In private practice, Professor Schönman was the lead attorney on the Deepwater Horizon class action settlement. He also served as an in-house deputy general counsel and director of operations for a closely held cosmetics company. His international work has involved company formation and construction arbitration in Riyadh, Dubai, and Kuwait. While he teaches at Qatar University College of Law, he also conducts research and consults companies in the field of sustainable agriculture. Professor Schönman, he received his bachelor degree from the Virginia Military Institute and his JD from Tulane University. He has received certificates for study in Paris, Tokyo, and Damascus. So Professor Schönman, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today on this panel, Careers Outside Europe, and you have the floor. Please feel free to complement my brief introduction. Thank you very much.
Sure. Well, thank you, Professor Lorena, for that very kind introduction. I'm honored to be here speaking with such a distinguished panel today. All the more so because you're giving me the opportunity to talk about myself, which is not something I often get to do. And thinking about my path to Qatar University since I was invited to speak it's been a lot of fun actually. I feel very fortunate and very lucky in that since graduating law school, it seems that each position that I've had seemed to open up more windows of opportunity. And I think a lot of attorneys will tell you that something similar. It's one of the beautiful aspects of the study of law, that you can um, not necessarily be completely focused on one area for your entire career. Now, granted, some people do that and enjoy their careers. I think I and my wife have kind of a sense of adventure and have always looked for opportunities to travel and to do new things. And having a legal career has been, the perfect conduit for that type of lifestyle. So I graduated law school and served in the United States Navy, and then went to work for the U.S. Federal Communications Commission. And the commission set the tone, I think, for the rest of my legal career because I clerked for one of the commissioners, and they are appointed by the President of the United States. There are 5 of them, and they vote on procedural and administrative rules and orders, we call them, which are essentially akin to legislation, except they're examined much, much more closely by administrative courts in the United States. And in the process of doing that, I was exposed to almost every legal subject that the Federal Communications Commission might have to deal with. And so it might surprise you to learn that not only were we concerned about, let's say, the broadband digital transition for television, but I had to learn about environmental law because when it came to tower sightings for cell phone service providers, there were environmental issues. And so it was a very multifaceted experience, and I was there for about 5 years. As Professor Lorena mentioned, I then had experiences working in-house. I worked for a cosmetics company that produced the raw materials for probably something that you are wearing or have used today. Almost every single skin cream or shampoo, anything that would touch your skin, they probably have produced the raw material that goes into it. It was an international company, and so the hours were very, very long, and I say long, not in a bad way. It was probably one of the more fun things that I've ever done because we were constantly, as we would put it, putting out fires. There was always some legal issue somewhere in the world that demanded immediate attention. And so it was a great deal of fun. Working on the Deepwater Horizon class action, which I think to this day is the largest class action from a monetary perspective in history, really gave me an opportunity to appreciate how the law can help people. There were communities along the Gulf Coast of the United States that were absolutely devastated by that accident, by that oil spill, and we were able to help them rebuild their lives. And that was a 4-year endeavor that I thoroughly enjoyed. And again, I think because I had the experience in a legal setting of very quickly coming up to speed on a different legal subject, that it just helped me enormously. I knew a little bit about environmental law, but I really had no background in oil and gas or disaster relief or anything like that. But having had years of being in a situation where I had to very quickly come up to speed on a legal issue was very beneficial. So then Qatar, full disclosure, I never envisioned becoming a professor, but part of my legal background did have me in this region for quite a bit before I met my wife. I practiced in Kuwait. I had helped open a White and Case office in Riyadh, and I'd done a lot of work in Dubai. And so when my wife was recruited to work in Qatar, we decided that our children were at the right age and that we would give it a chance. And my law firm was very, very generous and gracious and allowed me to work remotely, which I did for about 18 months. And then my 6 and 7-year-old children couldn't understand why daddy had to sleep all day and he was up all night. So when I received the offer from Qatar University, I was very grateful, and I'm still on great terms with my law firm, and in fact I do some consulting for them on occasion. But it's been almost 10 years now that I've been teaching at Qatar University. So again, another example of all of the wonderful different windows a legal career can open for you. I'm certain I can go back to practice if that's what I decide to do at some point. But I have to say, of all the experiences that I've had as an attorney, spending time with students has probably been the most rewarding thing I've ever done. It's been really a growth experience for me. Speaking of the different careers, the different opportunities you might have as students outside of Europe, I am very American-centric when it comes to legal education. I know that there are wonderful schools all over the world, but I happen to be, very familiar with a lot of the programs in the United States, and I can tell you, they are growing and they are evolving and they are wonderful. The downside is some of them can be very expensive. And so, it's important to take that into consideration when you make decisions. It's important to negotiate with schools to see, what the best deal you can get from them is. And I've helped students do that before. But, especially when you're considering an LLM or a PhD, some of the programs in the United States right now are attracting the best and brightest professors from all over the world. So it's definitely something to keep on your radar. The opportunity to actually practice in the United States is probably somewhat in flux right now, unfortunately. I did have a number of friends when I was at Tulane University, because of Tulane's connection with the Sorbonne in Paris and several schools in Germany. We had a large contingent of LLM students that would come each year. And I would say 25% of them were able to find employment in the United States after passing the New York or California bar exams. I thought that was a very impressive number. My understanding is that due to some changes that were made during the past presidential administration, that it may not be as easy. But I get the sense that those types of things are cyclical. And so you just have to, keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening in the country. As for the Middle East, I can speak to Qatar certainly, and also to a certain degree to the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia. I think, as I mentioned, I definitely, and my wife shares this, sense of adventure. And I think you have to have a sense of adventure to do well in this region. It is different. It is different. But I think if you give it a chance and you get to know the people and kind of understand the culture, you'll find that it is just wonderful. It is wonderful. I know that Qatar especially has received a lot of bad press because of certain issues related to the World Cup, or their conservative stance on certain things, and some of that is I think exaggerated or inflated. Some of it is absolutely spot on and true, and it really comes down to your comfort level to engage with a society that I mentioned that word evolving earlier. I think it is an evolving society. Things aren't going to change here overnight, but we are seeing changes throughout the region. I remember in the late 90s when I was studying in Kuwait. Kuwait was one of the first countries to extend the right to vote to women. And that was 20 some years ago, right? Or I'm dating myself. Not quite 30 years ago. Women have the right to vote here in Qatar. Women drive. Women are actually in a very powerful position in the state of Qatar, and I don't think that's something a lot of people outside the region understand. They are involved in politics. The mother of the current emir, her name is Sheikha Moza, is revered. She's responsible for having brought over 7 different U.S. colleges, including Georgetown University, to have satellite campuses here. So yeah, she's a driving force behind a lot of the change and a lot of the very positive initiatives that we have here. As far as legal practice, there are over 100 different law firms here representing, institutions from Europe, the United Kingdom, Australia, and the United States. A lot of that work is devoted to construction law, arbitration, just because of the large scale projects that they have endeavored to move forward with here, including a massive rail system, a new airport, of course, the stadiums for the World Cup, large infrastructure projects related to roadworks, and of course, things to support the oil and gas industry. So there's a great deal of work. It's important to note that attorneys that choose to work here would work for a law firm that is sponsored by a Qatari organization. If your goal is to argue in front of a tribunal, this is not the place to be. But if you have an interest in any of those other areas that I mentioned, there is a tremendous amount of work here, and I suspect that it will continue to be here in the future, even after the World Cup. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Professor. Very, very interesting, and I think that your inputs are very fruitful for students around the world. Would you say there is a remote work for Qatar companies nowadays? I mean, for the students who are watching us, are there possibilities of remote working after COVID? What do you think about those possibilities of remote working in Qatar?
It's an interesting question, and I don't know that I'm qualified to answer it. I can tell you that the infrastructure to support remote work here is outstanding. And in fact, I found it to be better than in the United States when I traveled back home. And the willingness at a local level to allow people to do that is certainly there. I think it really depends on the culture of the individual law firms when it comes to remote work, and I suspect that's true anywhere. I can tell you that the university implemented a remote work policy during COVID, and it worked well. And I'm shifting gears completely from legal work for a law firm and an academic environment. I'm sure that books are going to be written analyzing the effects of remote work on academia. While I feel like we had some of the best tools available in academia, it still fell short, of that in-person, in-class experience, especially when you're teaching a difficult subject to students who are speaking English as a second language.
Yes, perfect. Professor, you told me, I was very interested because you told me you worked for commissions, the Federal Communications Commissions in the United States. And this entails also space law, correct? Yes, here in Brazil, we are very interested in space law. We have a program and we are now drafting a national law concerning space, the exploration of space. And we know that in 1990, Tonga claimed 4 slots in geostationary orbit, and this was a hit. This was very, it was a major news for the international community, especially concerning the International Telecommunications Union. So during your practice, you dealt with space law, with dealing with slots, dealing with satellites, communication satellites in geostationary orbits. What is your experience, in drafting rules? Did you have, did you produce secondary regulation, as we called, to regulate space?
Well, I was never involved in anything that dealt with the regulation of space. Most of the things that I dealt with were the life cycle issues from build out to launch and recovery. But I'm so glad you brought that up, especially for students who might have any remote interest in that area. I was so intimidated by the notion of space law, right? Because you have this, in my mind, vision of the rocket scientist, someone who is just so brilliant and understands everything related to propulsion and getting that rocket out into space. In reality, it's not that complicated or difficult. A lot of the things that I dealt with were contractual, and as I mentioned, life cycle related. And it was just such an incredible learning experience because you're talking about a project that might have a 30 to 50-year timeline, sometimes even longer than that. And just the contractual elements to that, I just found fascinating.
Amazing. I have learned a little bit about Qatar, and of course we know that you are one of the tiniest countries in the world, but also one of the richest, and you deal a lot with technology. So I believe your natural gas is liquefied, if I'm not wrong, to be transported.
The majority, yes. Correct.
Yes. So do you think there is a lot of possibility to, mix technology with law, and there is this opening to, law tax in Qatar for students who are willing to not deal directly practicing law, being an attorney, but also offering solutions, environmental solutions for Qatar with softwares, with programs. What do you think? Does Qatar have this opening for students who want to deal with tech and law?
Again, another great question. And I'm reminded of a project that my son is working on. My son just turned 13, and his project is to analyze the Qatari Constitution and suggest amendments to the U.S. Constitution based on what's in the Qatari Constitution. And I had never read it, to be honest. And there is actually an amendment in the Qatar Constitution that stipulates that it's the state's responsibility to not only educate its citizens, but to encourage them to understand science and technology. It's embedded in their constitution. So yeah, to answer your question, absolutely. It's they very much have their eyes on the future. They very much understand that their dependence on fossil fuels is going to be their detriment if they don't figure out other ways to diversify their economy. And so they are constantly looking at ways to do that. They are very entrepreneurial. They're very accepting of new technologies, with the exception of cryptocurrency. That's another story. So yes. And you just mentioned the size of the country. And so I just wanted to, for a moment, talk about something completely non-legal related. I am the head of Boy Scouts of America here in Qatar. So the Boy Scouts, we have about 118 families from all over the world. It's not just American families. We have families from all over the region, and it's wonderful. But it's given me the opportunity to see this entire country. We camp a lot. We have lots of different activities where we're teaching young men and women how to survive out in the outdoors. And it is, in some places, very stark. The deserts are forbidding and not pleasant, but there are other areas where you have rolling sand dunes that cascade into the Arabian or to the other Arabian Gulf, and it's just spectacular. The weather from, I would say, late October until late April is just beautiful. It probably doesn't get over 30 degrees during the day and dips down into the upper teens, lower 20s in the evening. And so, a lot of the families will have get-togethers around a bonfire, in February, and it's really wonderful. It does get very, very hot, and in and around this time of year in May. We're hitting the 40s right now. In July, we'll get up to 45, 48. So it's a tough place to be for the summer.
I believe we Brazilians right, Professor Atalanu? We will be very, pleasant in that temperature, especially you in the Northeast. Yeah, this is normal for us. Although due to climate change, I must say that here in Brazil, we are facing now 4 degrees. This has never happened in my town, in my city. We are now, of course, we are in winter, beginning winter, but 4 degrees is something that it never happened in my town. But we are used to 40, 45. This is summer for us. This is summer, so this is very good. I think I'll be very, very comfortable in Qatar, Professor. Thank you very much. And as a last question, then I will open to students and participants, and also Professor Atalanu. I'd like to ask you about environmental law and also the participation of Qatar in the international community. What is the political, political role of Qatar in the international community, in the United Nations? What concerning environmental law? What do you think it's Qatar position concerning those transboundary things that we have, especially environmental law?
Sure. It's a difficult question for me to answer because I think there's a disconnect between what the government talks about and what they advertise and how they represent themselves before the UN and other international bodies and what actually happens here. It's a young country, right? And they only recently have been a wealthy country. You mentioned their wealth earlier. They do have the highest GDP per capita on the planet. It is a very wealthy country. I think it comes down to how you prioritize environmental issues. Clearly, their dependence on fossil fuels is not going to stop anytime soon, and it's not in their interest for other countries to end their reliance, right? So, you can say what you will about that. From a purely domestic standpoint, when it comes to environmental issues, you see signs everywhere reminding people to recycle, to care for the environment. So I do think they're talking a good talk. I don't know if they're walking a good walk, but I think their intentions are good. I do believe that, and I think that's a difficult thing. This isn't related to the environment, but I'm sure everyone's aware of all of the criticism that the country received in relation to migrant workers. Especially at the very beginning, after they were awarded the World Cup, there was this frenzy of activity to build stadiums and to build the infrastructure, and they lost sight of caring for the people who were responsible for making that happen. And once it was brought to their attention, once Amnesty International and other organizations had the world's attention, I have to say most people here would agree that the Qataris bent over backwards to make sure that they corrected those wrongs. Some people would argue too little, too late. Some people argue, there was an article in The Guardian just yesterday saying that there's a certain amount of money that Qatar should contribute to those workers. We'll see if those things happen. My point is, I think it is akin to the environment in that once they understand the impact of their behavior, they do have mechanisms in place to effectuate change. And again, sometimes that change doesn't happen as quickly as we would like to see in the West, but it's a slow-moving government. It's a slow-moving process. And a lot of that, I think you might understand this from your experience in the region, is based on their culture of communication. They are very concerned that everyone be at the table, that everyone have a voice. And there's something special and kind of wonderful about that. But it does make things move slowly.
Thank you very much, Professor Schönman. I'd like to open, right now for students, if students who are present, Professor Atalanu, Professor Lahange, if you'd like to ask any questions to Professor Schönman, this is the right time.
Yes, I have a question, Professor Schönman. Thank you very much for giving this big context for the situation, indeed, and as well to give a lot of details as well concerning studying and working in Qatar and Middle East in general. I would like to know what is, let's say, the proportion, or let's say, how the Qatari students work with the non-Qatari students, or how do they study and work together? Do the Qatari students go abroad? Like, of course, there are many, I guess, as well, foreigners coming to Qatar to study and to work. So how does it work, this interaction?
Well, so I mentioned that there are other universities. So I'll talk about that in a moment. Qatar University is the national university for the country. And at the law school right now, we only have Qatari students. And that's just a function of COVID. Prior to COVID, we still had a very small number of students from other countries. I would say maybe 10%, if that. And they were all from the region, and they were all fluent in Arabic and English. All students attend university for free here. The College of Law is very popular. Classes are separated by gender. Mm-hmm. So I have male sections and female sections. So that's Qatar University. But as I mentioned, Sheikh Moza was instrumental in bringing over other universities. I mentioned Georgetown, Weill Cornell, which is a famous medical institution in the United States, also has a campus here, as well as Texas A&M, which has a strong engineering program. So effectively what she did was she picked schools that had some of the best programs in the United States and asked them to set up degree-specific satellite campuses. They're generally fairly small schools. I think Weill Cornell may have 200 students that are studying medicine, but they receive a degree that says Weill Cornell. It doesn't say Weill Cornell of Qatar. So they have the same standards, the same expectations as Cornell University would have back in the United States. Those institutions do not have separate, gender-based classes. I think medical school just couldn't run that way. But Sheikh Moza was very keen that those Western organizations would keep their Western identity teaching here in Qatar. Did I answer your question?
Yes, and as well, the Qatari students, do they want to come to Europe, to UK, to United States, or so? What are the perspectives as well about? Is it only for working in Qatar, or sometimes they go outside as well? The Qatari students.
I would say between 5 and 8% do pursue advanced degrees either in Europe or Europe, the UK, or the United States.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Not as many as I would like to see, but we have an LLM program and a PhD program which we just started here at Qatar University. So that's an avenue for them also.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other question, Professor Talagno? Or...
Yes, I have a question, Professor Shah. You have previously said that when you and your wife firstly thought about moving to Qatar and Middle East, it was some kind of feud with, I would say, an adventurous aura. What would you say for somebody that wished to live in Middle East for the future?
I think it really depends on what you want to get out of the experience. The salaries in this region tend to be competitive. And so some people come for that reason alone, which is fine. I see that people who have that as their motivation tend to stay for 2 to 3 years, and then they cycle back. They don't really get to know the country or the local culture, which again is fine. My wife and I, we just have a different travel philosophy, I guess, and really did want to get to know the culture, know the society, and we had expected to maybe stay for 2 or 3 years, but really we kind of fell in love. We enjoy the weather. We enjoy the proximity to Europe and to Asia. If you were to pinpoint Qatar on a map and then draw a circle of where you could be within 5 hours, it's impressive. They have a wonderful national airline. Qatar Airways, if you've never flown it before, is truly a top-notch experience. When I say sense of adventure, I'm a foodie. I love to cook, and so I love being exposed to different cuisines. And Qatar could rival any major European or U.S. citizen in that, or U.S. City rather, in that regard. There are restaurants from all over the world here. Driving here, as in the UAE or Kuwait or Saudi, is challenging, to put it mildly, to put it kindly. What's interesting though, this is just a small cultural tidbit. When you're driving in the city, people are not safe. Yeah, I'll just put it that way. And you kind of feel like they're aggressive, and it can create a lot of fear. But when you're out in the desert, that same person that might have almost created an accident in the city will drive up next to your car to make sure that you're okay. It's this sense that when they're out in the desert, they're in their element, and they're the kindest, most hospitable, warm people. I cannot tell you how many times I've been invited to someone's tent to sit around a fire for tea. Just random acts of kindness that I don't take it for granted. And I think, if you're willing to be open to those kinds of experiences, then you'll fall in love with this region also.
Thank you very much, Professor. I mean, you brought a vibrant experience from Qatar. I think we are all enchanted by Qatar and willing to go for the World Cup.
Good.
That's amazing. And also to the desert, to explore the desert with the Boy Scout. And thank you very much for this fruitful debate, for explaining and enlightening to us about Qatar, about international law, about your experience, about the possibilities for students, researchers in your College of Law. Thank you very much, especially telling us that there is a PhD program right now, that this will be very good for students and researchers, having Qatar as an option and an excellent option as well. Thank you very much. Thank you for taking part in this debate. I know today is a very special day for you in Qatar as well, for you and your family. So I will just close your presentation right now, if I may. And thank you very much. I'm pretty excited to get to know Qatar and to meet you in person as well, to receive you and your family here in Brazil, and possibly to meet you in Qatar in person. Thank you very much for your participation. And your last words, please, for closing your presentation.
Well, thank you again for inviting me. It's been wonderful to meet all of you. I hope you trust my sincerity when I tell you come visit. We would love to host you here. And to all of the students who may still be taking their final exams, I'm not sure, best of luck. And likewise, if you find yourself in the state of Qatar, please look up Qatar University and find me.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much. We hope to have you here in the next year and also in ENE Brazil. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So right now, I'd like just to introduce briefly Professor Matheus Atalânio. Please, Professor, feel free to complement your experience. Professor Matheus Atalânio is a Brazilian professor, is an associate professor at Centro Universitário Estácio do Ceará, Ceará is a state in Brazil, which the capital is Fortaleza. Professor Matheus Atalena is a guest professor at the University of Fortaleza, Uni 4, is also a private legal consultant for public policies, and Professor Matheus Atalena was a parliamentary legal advisor in 2020 and 2021. It's a member of the Brazilian National Bar Commission and also of the International Law Association. Thank you very much, Professor, for your participation in ENE, in this panel, in this unique panel, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Professor Lorena. Thank you, Professor Aurélien. It's a pleasure to be here at the Hague University, and firstly, I would say it's an honor. It's the second time that I could do projects with the Hague University, and it's for me, in comparison with Professor Charles, it will be a very easier task to talk about my life. It's way this kind of debate, this kind of discussions is, for me, it's the best one, because I mean, I'll say it for me. I really sensed Professor Charles' honesty. You know, I really saw him talking the truth about what he feels about Qatar. And I, speaking about myself another time, I'm eager to meet Qatar. It's a country that I probably would like to meet any day. Well, I have two disclaimers to do. The first disclaimer is that as I've worked a lot of time with Brazilian public authorities, and now I'm not directly working, I'm not properly saying about anything which will represent any authority feeling or intention about any project or any proposal specifically. It's my experience of working with Brazilian law and international law, which I believe it will be probably more interesting. And the second disclaimer is not properly a disclaimer. It's more of a warning. It's please forgive me for my English. It's been 8 to 10 years that I don't speak any English. I've spoken other languages by the time, French mostly. I will try my best to be comprehensive and to be understandable. Well, yeah, my presentation was I'm Brazilian. I'm 29 years old. I've worked as a lawyer, as a legal advisor for public policies mostly, but also for migration policies. I've been a part of bench of lawyers and a multicultural bench of professionals, and we've managed migration work here in Brazil, in Fortaleza, and also Brasilia, and with international bodies, NGOs, and stuff like that. And nowadays, I'm working sometimes as a jurist, but mostly as a researcher attached to the University Center of Brasilia, and an assistant professor here in Fortaleza. It's my last month here in Fortaleza. I'll be back in Brasilia to work more in the Brazilian National Bar Commission, which is the institution who holds all of law issue related to advocacy, to international relations in the profession of being a lawyer, which is an honor for me. And I'm only 29, and I'm almost 5 years of experience properly, and I've been given those difficult tasks of representing my country sometimes, and representing my hometown, and representing, I mean, a will of change, a will of social commitment with law, with international law, with multicultural path, mostly migrationally speaking. My parcours, my academic parcours, I've got a law degree, a bachelor's degree, a Bachelor of Laws, an LLB, as we could say also, at Centro Universitário Cristos, here in Fortaleza, in 2018. And between 2015 and 2016, I've managed these studies at Université Paris-Nanterre. And there I've met Professor Alain Pelé, which probably showed me what I needed to do for my life, and what I needed to understand about law, with probably to understand international law, or to try to understand international law with a professional so incredible as he was. And after it, I got passionate for international law. 2019, I've came back to Paris, to Université Paris-Nanterre, in order to do a master's degree, an LLM, Master en Droit International et des Organisations Internationales. And there I've met a lot of professors that they were really, really amazing for my career, and for things that I now believe and now publish in my opinions here in Brazil, which were Professor Pierre Baudot-Livinec, and also Professor Jean-Marc Touvenin, which also is Secretary General of the Academy of International Law. He was probably both of those professors. They were really important for my career, because Professor Pierre Baudot-Livinec gave me indirectly my subject of thesis, and which is the law of international responsibility, following Professor Pelé's path, also with Professor James Crawford, which rest in peace, Professor Crawford. And Professor Jean-Marc Touvenin, he was my professor in a discipline called International Economic Law, and nowadays I'm working as a researcher in a bench of professors with indirectly international economic law, more specifically the international law on foreign investment, working properly with companies, and working specifically with OECD, World Bank, and other institutions. The figure of the ombudsman, and how it can change things in, to give more effectable manners to the BITs, and also to raise sustainable development, and which is Professor Nitish Moneburun. His great research, and now I'm attached to him. It's been a great experience. I've actually didn't finish my master's degree because of the pandemic. I've come back. I came back. I have already done another master's degree in private law, and nowadays I'm attached to the University Center of Brasilia, doing a master's in law and public policies, more specifically international law and public policies. And my thesis director is His Excellency Professor Francisco Rezec, which was not only a former ICJ judge, but he was also Ministry of Foreign Affairs here in Brazil. He was for 2 times a judge of the Brazilian Supreme Court, and it has been an honor for me working with such a singular person, a great human being, a great professor, And here in Brazil, an interesting question that Professor Laurent Aurélien asked Mr. Charles. Here in Brazil, I would say that we can. I would say that university studies, they are part-time, or I mean, they are not full-time handling. We could also work, and I was talking about all this experience that I've passed through, and I was studying and working normally. I mean, it's not easy. It's we need to understand that it's not easy. It's hard. It's difficult. Probably you need to go to the biggest cities of Brazil. Mine is not a tremendous city. It's a big city, but not a tremendous city. I mean, there are more specifically cities to work with law and international law and public policies, such as São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, and Brasilia. Also Belo Horizonte, which is a great city. It's an amazing city. I've never met, and I mean, I believe 6 months ago we've met me and Professor Lorena, of course, my friend Amina and Professor Neme, which they work indirectly with us, and it was a great honor to be a part of that time. My professional experience also, it's I've worked a lot as a private lawyer, and I've worked with mostly foreigners. Most of them speak or Italians, maybe Argentinians. We have a lot of those kind of nationalities in Brazil. Italians, Argentinians, French. I mean, not only French, but French speakers. We have an amazing here in Fortaleza, cause d'un film, Jean-Paul Belmondo film, at the 70s maybe. He came here to Fortaleza, and I believe a lot of French speakers have watched this film, and they were delighted to meet Fortaleza. It's an excellent city. It's by the beach. It's nowadays, even with this cold weather, we are 32 degrees. Even with the cold weather, we are 32 degrees, and it's an excellent city to live. But after I published a couple things, and I've presented my research in different universities, a Brazilian congressman named His Excellency Heitor Freire, which is one of the most voted Brazilian congressmen in Brazil. He asked me to raise a team with him and to work between 2020 and 2021 in a specific project that he was trying to build in his parliamentary career. Then he invited me to live in Brasilia, which is the capital, and to work directly in the Brazilian parliament, more specifically in the Chamber of Deputies. And he specifically was known for two things. He worked for many years at the HSBC Bank, and he was a finance executive, and then he came back to Brazil, and he managed to be a Brazilian congressman, and he was great known in Brazil. He was known for his skills in finance and also with languages. I believe he speaks between 7 and 8 languages. He has a gift, God's gift, and he was specifically with a membership position in a committee of Foreign Affairs and National Defense in the Chamber of Deputies, because before Brazilian acts, laws, bills they go into plenary, they need to pass into some standing committees, and normally they pass through two or more than two, and all Brazilian treaties, all treaties that Brazil wants to sign and to engage itself, they need to pass in this Committee on Foreign Affairs, National Defense, and also the Committee on Constitutional Rights, which both he was a part. And in this Commission of National Defense and Foreign Affairs, he had a position, a membership position, an important position. Then he asked me to call some friends, some professors, some academic members, lawyers mostly, to do a project, to do projects between the OECD, because Brazil it's in the middle of the admission at OECD, which represents a great will of Brazil for almost 20 years. Also, we had these BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, which represents a different part of our international relations. And mostly we were engaged in a project that it was probably the greatest thing that I've done in my career so far, which is the project of the proposal of compulsory licensing as not only for COVID-19 vaccines, but also COVID-19 all medical supplies. And His Excellency Heitor Freire, he was one of the leads in this proposal. He was. We've managed to have public hearings with Minister of State of Foreign Affairs, Ernesto Araújo, and also Ambassador Carlos França. We've managed to have a lot of public hearings, and with a lot of strength, a lot of ability, a lot of hard work, nights without sleep, a little well, and we've managed to raise this proposal in Brazil of compulsory licensing, suspending the TRIPS agreement of one of the annexes of the Marrakesh agreements of WTO. And this was amazing, because by the time, and I mean my father, when he got COVID-19, he lost 26 kilos, and he was nearly to death, and was just so close to die. And by the time, it was so meaningful to me, because it led me into a really human rights path, a human rights needing ability, and because by the time, the only idea that we have probably is one of the ideas by this time also, sorry, which is that without vaccines, probably people will die. And Brazilian government, unfortunately, by the time, and I'm specifically talking for me right now, they wouldn't enjoy this will of buying vaccines and medical supplies. They had this idea, probably from Sweden or some country like that the vaccines wouldn't be useful, handful by that time, which for me, more specifically, it was a huge mistake. After it, and more specifically right now, I've quit my job, and it was a great job, but I was searching for another thing, maybe going back to Europe, maybe going back to Paris Nanterre, or I mean Cambridge, maybe, or Leiden. I was specifically thinking about my career, my academic career. Then I got back to the university, and I had this proposal for of Professor Nitish Moneburun to work with him, with a bunch of professors in different of different nationalities, Chilean, Colombian, Argentinians, a lot of universities and persons of different nationalities are in the same project to raise and publish some UNCTAD commented data. So nowadays we are, I'm really pleased of this position as a researcher, and also my position as a member of the International Association here in Brazil, which was also something new, something recent, and I'm still managing to work with all of those information. Well, I believe that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Atalânio. I will give you a sincere compliment on your experience because you deserve it. It's a vibrant career, so I think you are a role model for all the students who are watching us right now, because you're only 29 years old, and being 29 and having this broad experience, worked at universities, having worked abroad, having worked at our Congress, our legislative function. This is amazing. And it's pretty much it. Here in Brazil, we have, as you correctly mentioned, we have to work and study on the same time. Usually we have to do that. We cannot devote ourselves entirely to academia. And this gives us also a step forward, I believe, in getting experience from the market, and also having the theoretical part, which comes from academia, and trying to make them blend and to harmonize those two areas and to put them in practice as well. I'd like to ask you, Professor Atalânio, what could you say about the due legislative procedure of Brazil for our students, because I believe they would be interested in how to mix policy, politics with law, and how to work with politicians, with public agents. What is your experience on that? What you could say for those international students from The Hague that are willing to work also for governments, for authorities, and probably in Brazil?
Yeah, Professor Lorena, thank you for your question. It's yes, this is something that maybe I could add people who are watching about my experience. Well, I think the first thing we need to do, because it's two questions in one. I will start about the end, and then I will go to the legislative process. Okay, the first thing that I would recommend students, which are probably seeing it in professionals at all, it was something that I've done here in Brazil. We have I've worked a lot with advocacy, which I have, me and a couple friends, a couple professors, we had a few projects that we've just learned. We got to know that some problems were happening in our society. Problems with children, problems with education, problems with cultural meanings, health. Even though we have this universal health, public and universal health, including for migrants, which is something interesting for coming to Brazil, always. I believe that that's questioning everything, and not only questioning everything and putting into paper. I believe I have this phrase that my dear friend, a judge here in Brazil, he told me that the inspiration needs to find me well seated here with my computer, with lights on, with air conditioner on, if it's too hot, and I need to be in the right place, in the right spot, in the right moment, with the right ideas that I've also had already written in some papers or something. I'm old school, I believe. I do everything in paper. It's a chaos here in my office, and that's how I started. I started to I got to know some authorities here in Brazil, some public des autres fonctionnaires, we would say. I have known a lot of them, and in this academia path and issues, and I offered myself. I offered myself not only for a job, for working, but I've said, uh, His Excellency, I probably have an idea that you might like, and it's quite amazing how people are willing to listen, because parliamentary members and mayors and governors and stuff, they normally don't have any time. And if you are in the academia and you have these projects well written with the correct methodology, and and you are trying to solve a problem that he has, that you have, that your society have, probably they'll hear you. They are public servants. They work for us. They work with us in order to embrace a better community. So I my my biggest advice, my biggest I mean, it's something that I do quite often. I'm not afraid. There are people just like you and me, and normally they were of the academia. I mean, in Brazil, it's quite normal that professors become um, representatives, des autres fonctionnaires, and things like that. So don't be afraid, and respectfully try and demand time with public authorities. That's what I've done, and for every yes that I've heard in my life, I've heard at least 50 or 60 no's. So I'm not a role model for, I mean, I don't consider myself a role model for success, but I do consider myself a role model of trying. I really try. I try hard. I try hard to make this place that we live a better place. I mean, this is my secret, I would say. And the first part of the question is it's interesting because my first position as a professor was in constitutional law, Brazilian constitutional law. I loved international law, but here in Fortaleza there was never positions available. So I started to work with Brazilian constitutional law, and I saw by that time the Brazilian constitutional law as a thing. And when I was working inside the Chamber of Deputies, inside the Senate, inside the presidents and the ministries, for me it was a whole different situation, a whole different debate, a whole different institution. So I have, before I speak directly of the Brazilian constitutional process, another thing that I can give an advice is to try the very best to do this kind of walkings, of meetings inside public institutions, such as Supreme Court, such as Parliament, Senate, and the ministries, if open. I mean, in Brazil, not all of them are open, but I thought after moving to Brasilia that my mind was settling a new kind of Brazilian constitutional law. I have understand that 513 deputies and 81 senators, they have specifically not only party issues, but also some organizational issues. They have some kind, and I'm speaking about myself, some corporative issues, which for the lobby professional, for the advocacy professional, they need to be well known. They need to be well known. Well, here in Brazil, we have the possibility to change the constitution, to raise an amendment. We need a quorum of votes, major. I mean, it's almost impossible to raise an amendment because by the first you need to have 151 signatures of another congressman. And I mean, we have in Brazil more than 20 parties. We have from the left from the left to right, we have 26 or 27 parties with representation at the Brazilian parliament. So it's quite hard to change the constitution, but we have more than 100 amendments of our constitution, because time have passed, and we have a long constitution with 250 articles and a lot of paragraphs, annexes, and stuff, and it's really hard to a country so big as Brazil with continental dimensions. It's really hard to manage a problem that a constitutional right, which it's attached to a problem in Fortaleza and not attached to a problem in, for example, Belo Horizonte. This is the major difficult path of our constitution. But the laws, they are not that easy to change. But these committees that I've commented, they are really important to democracy, because they are normally the only proposals that pass through this obligatory commission. They are mandatory. They are compulsory. So in order to a process to get into plenary, and then to get the votes, to receive the votes, and then to pass through the presidency, and then get into vacatio legis, and then working law. And we have years, maybe months or years of debates, maybe weekly debates. So we have here in Brazil a lot of proposals, but there is less than 5% of the proposals they are object of acceptance. Normally they are the opposite. They are normally, for a year, they are maybe 90 or 95% of the proposals they are rejected. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor, for sharing your experience with us. This is incredible about Brazil. I would compliment you, because we have 122 amendments to our constitution, and thus it's so difficult to change our constitution. Probably the French constitution from 1958 has about 24 amendments. It's so much older than ours, and it's amazing how many amendments we do have since 1988, comparing to the French Constitution. And still, it's a very difficult legislative process. So I agree with you, and we have a very interesting, democratized, let's say that way, legislative procedure, because we have so many hearings, so many discussions, so many sessions, so many commissions, especially the ones you cited about Constitution and Justice Commission, and also Exterior Relations Commission. So it is a very complex process, and indeed we have lots of changes in our constitution, but due to the fact that this constitution entails more than 212 million people, which are spread out of continental country, which is very heterogeneous. So this is very amazing about Brazil. This is not a shortcoming in my point of view. This is a positive fact to have the experience of having a constitution that embraces so many people and a geography portion, which is so wide. So this is amazing. Thank you very much, Professor. I'd like to open the questions to Professor Lohange and Professor Jorge Torres as well. Please, Professor Lohange.
Yes. So yes, I will give one question. So first of all, a comment. Yes, the word makes it that 2 weeks ago, actually, Professor Touvenin was in the building of the university. He was walking in our corridor as well, because there was this competition that your students, Lorena, I mean, they went participating, and one of them apparently recognized me from me giving a class in Brazil. So that's yeah, the world is quite well connected sometimes, and yes, and I think as well the movie in Fortaleza is The L'Homme de Rio, because indeed all French people have seen that movie with Belmondo, Jean-Paul Belmondo. So yes, very impressive. 29 years old. You have gotten a lot of experience in Brazil, in France, and in many different fields of law. But what is indeed very impressive is, in my opinion, that you do public law, private law, I mean, business law, commercial trade, and as well, yeah, you worked with very eminent professors and as well different institutions. And from your accent in French, you speak French fluently, I'm pretty sure, so from what I understand. So concretely, how do you see yourself, let's say, in 10 years? Because I guess you will want to continue to work on some legislations in Brazil, because particularly this legislation concerning the compulsory licensing, it was extremely connected as well to the fact that you wanted in Brazil to be successful as well with the family, as you said, as a context, your father. So now, let's say you want to focus more on public sector, or you would like to focus more on international law, as you are in the International Law Commission, or the private sector. So what would you like to do? You had indeed as a professor, Professor Touvenin in International Economic Law, which is a mix of public and private law. So what would you like to do indeed for the next years? Because yeah, you have done already a lot. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Professor Lohange. It's a $1 million question, I would say. Since I've came back to Fortaleza, because I was by the end of 2021, I was still in Brazilian, and then I came back. I was thinking about during this contest, public contest for diplomacy, which was the way that I've met all these things. After I've met Professor Pelé, he told me that one of the things that he thought about his professional career was to become a diplomat. And I don't have these important parents. My father was just a small commerçant, a small businessman. We would say it Camilo, if you know. I mean, he was from a really poor situation. My mother, it's well, she's from the academy, and then the only thing I've had for my life was the academy. And I would say in 10 years, maybe I will have the doctorate in international law, and I will be more specifically involved with politics. I believe it's not a thing that that I pursued, but I believe it's something that I'm being invited, even if it's a hard thing to say and to consider, because it's a really hard life in Brazil for a parliamentary and a politician at all. But I see myself working more in politics than international law, even though I'm really passionate about international law. So probably I will be in 10 years in the Brazilian Congress myself.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Talanio. Now I will give the floor to Professor Jorge Torres. I would like to say in advance that Professor Jorge Torres has an appointment afterwards, so he won't be able to answer any questions, but he will be very glad to receive questions through email, and you can mail me and he will respond it. So I'll just present Professor Jorge Torres from Peru, my fellow colleague. Professor Jorge Izak Torres is a legal consultant, is an attorney at law, graduated by the Catholic University from St. Mary in Peru, graduated also in business administration by the National University Federico Villarreal, president of a school called Preeminência Justicia, which is a school of fundamental rights, a very important school, author, co-author, and co-organizer of several books and treaties in constitutional law, administrative law, penal law, and was also the co-editor of the commented penal codes from Ecuador and Colombia. So please welcome Professor Jorge. If you could just open your camera for us, you have the floor. I can share your diapositivas. Professor Jorge, are you listening to us? Just sent him a message, Professor Lahange. Let's see.
Yep.
Because he is online, but probably maybe he's not listening.
Maybe in meanwhile I can give another question to our guest. Yes. So yes, when you be, probably I guess elected at the Congress or working in politics in a few years.
Excuse me, can you hear me?
Yes, Professor Torres.
Oh yes, Professor Jorge. ¿Cómo estás? ¿Todo bien?
Thank you very much. Okay, appreciate, doctor.
Could
Very
you
honored.
open your camera, Professor, please?
And don't. It's okay. I'll go now.
Yes, please. I will share your screen. I will share the diapositivas en la pantalla, ¿sí?
Okay, thank you very much. In principle, the Hague University and the Dr. Lorena Bacianeto for the invite me and the important event. In principle, I say the concurrent scenario present as with a new reality characterized by the validity of the new legal system in force, call it the constitutional state of law. In addition, the advancement of the new technologies is increasing present, basically. Second time, we have the legal formation for access of the professional career. In this sense, the legal formation is basically has to do with professional education for future professionals, lawyers, that is taught in the law schools of the country's universities. Thus, professional formation implies the set of the teachings was proposed is the formation of the studies of the students for a professional practice, in addition to continuing their comprehensive training. Continues for the legal formation to access of the professional career. I say that legal formation means professional formation in legal matters. Finally, it's understood to say training must be a church of the least lawyers in a certain professional cases in another profession. Since the dictation, some subjects will be a church and other professionals. For example, in this case, the subjects such as legal informatics, legal mathematics, legal medicine, which must be a church of system singer engineering or poor in mathematics and medical examiners, for example. It would be desirable for them be a dictated for professional in both professions, such as, in this case, of the subject of legal medicine, a lawyer and doctor at the same time in church. However, which is rarely possible because it's not very common to find professionals with double degrees of this nature. Next, we have the term the state politics for new legal careers. Prime moment we have trained principle. Repeat, trained principle. We are the opinion in order to have legitimacy for legal training in the new legal career to be developed next. Law professors must also have to law degree in say new legal career. We have called this observance trained principle. In the second time, we have the formation are not training of specialization. As we have pointed out, a university legal career can only be matched with the nature of professional formation and different than board training and administration. Science training is the studies or the practice to the prof, the level knowledge, technical aptitude, or executive ability in useful activities and speciality or in those of a professional nature. And specialization is the theoretical or practical knowledge of a genuine nature in a sense, science or art. Intensification of the study of the exercise in any of the specialized branches of the legal encyclopedia and the activities connected within. Finally, we have pilot plans. The new professional careers must have a promotion of complete career, the acts, and a test. This in order to evaluate the performance and professional impact. Next, we have the new legal careers professionals in America. We have the corporate law career. This career exists in the ESAN University. The curriculum present the various business, commercial, and corporate matters. The graduate profile ability to advise and resolve different situations within companies or organizations in matters of civil, patrimonial, and corporative law, basically. continues in the corporate law career. The professional developed. We have corporation companies, law firms, and international organization, and advisor consultant on legal manager, diplomatic positions on different public and private organizations. The most important, the title professional, corporate lawyer, different al title of lawyer. Then we have the new legal careers, not only for America. I propose, in principle, the digital law career. The curriculum have the various subjects relate the new technologies. I consider in the graduate profile ability to advise and resolve different situations within public and private entities in relation to law and the relationship with new and upcoming technologies and artificial intelligence. Continues for the digital law career. We have professional developed in corporations, companies, law firms, and international organizations, an advisor, consultant, manager, digital legal director. The most important in this new career, the digital law, is the title professional as digital lawyer. The next new career, not only for America, we have the criminal law career. I propose as curriculum the various subjects relate to criminalistics and autonomous science. The graduate profile, ability to advise and resolve with full professional authority to different situations and developed on analyst investigation, discovery, and scientific verification to alleged crime or an alleged offender. Continues for the criminal law career that I propose. We have professional development, judiciary, public ministry, law firms, and international criminal law organizations, different public or private organizations. The most important, the criminal law career is the title professional as criminal lawyer. Finally, I propose into the new legal careers, not only for America, the interdisciplinary law career. I consider as curriculum the various subjects of the science and disciplines of knowledge in additional to law. In the graduate profile, ability to advise and resolve different situations from the legal point of view, but also from the principles and scope of the various science and disciplines of human knowledge within public and private entities. Continue for the interdisciplinary law careers. I consider that professional development is in the corporations, companies, law firms, and international organization, and advisory consultant, manager, and interdisciplinary director. The most important is the title professional as interdisciplinary lawyer. Thank you very much for attention.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Torres. It's a great pleasure to meet you here remotely. For those who don't know Professor Torres, Professor Torres is a very well-known lawyer in Peru, and also the president of a very important school called Prominencia Justicia. And this school promotes several congresses and seminars throughout the year, and usually talking about international law, human rights, fintechs, interdisciplinary, subjects which are inherently linked to law. And I have a great admiration for Professor Torres. And thank you very much, Professor. And I would advise students to look for Prominencia Justicia School of Fundamental Rights. There are lots of treaties which Professor Torres is the author and also co-author, and very important treaties which entail not only Peru, of course, but also Latin America countries such as Colombia, Ecuador, Brazil, Argentina, Chile. So I would be very glad if you could look for Professor Torres' books and articles. So, Professor, muchas gracias por su participación, por su approach en la presentación, en la ponencia. Estamos muy felices por estar aquí y soy segura que todos que están viendo, asistiendo, comprendieron su ponencia y pueden más adelante entrar en contacto con usted para que tengan un contacto más directo y puedan también enterarse sobre las profesiones jurídicas en Latinoamérica, en América del Sur. Muchas gracias por su participación. Es un honor que esté aquí conozco y que esté participando de un evento en La Haya. Muchas gracias, profesor.
Muchísimas gracias, apreciada doctora Lorena. Muy honrado y agradecido a la Universidad de La Haya, y quedo a su disposición. Mi saludo y también consideración a los distinguidos colegas que coincido en la presente oportunidad. Muchos saludos.
Muchas gracias de La Haya. Muchas gracias, profesor.
Muchas gracias, profesor, y que nos vemos pronto. Sí, muchas gracias por todo, por la participación, y mantengamos contacto. So I would like to open Professor Lujange if any student would like to ask a final question to Professor Atalano, and then we can close the panel.
Yes, so I do not see question on the side of the students, but of course they can still bring one while I'm seeing it, my question, I mean. So I will continue what I was asking you, Professor Atalano. Yes, so when you will be elected, and I hope that indeed soon, I mean in your career, which are the, let's say, the main focus you would like to have indeed for Brazil, maybe some reforms? So what would be your center point, for example, as member of the Congress in Brazil, that you think there should be a change of legislation or improvement of legislation?
Thank you, Professor Lujange. It's an excellent question. The first thing that I believe when I entered politics, I have managed to see candidates in the beginning, in the middle, and in the end of their careers. And something that I've noted was that firstly, the winner candidates normally they do have some assignment to do, some idea, some major idea. We have here, for instance, we have here in Fortaleza, we have one of the most known Brazilian congressmen, which represent my state, my federal state, that his thing is working for animals' rights, for example. When I first thought as myself as a public servant, and more specifically a politician, I thought about education. In Brazil, we have we have a major problem of education. We have managed to work it. We have gained. We have done a few steps. I can assure that analphabetism is not the problem that it was. I mean, 20 or 30 years before. So nowadays, the problem is to give something as a return for youngsters, for all of our country, and mostly the ones in poor states such as Ceará, for example, such as Pernambuco, for example, which the public education it's really hard because we don't have properly the means to transportation, to food, to health. I mean, everything attached, and I mean, all together, they have this impact in education. And I believe my idea is not properly go into education because I don't believe that we have a bad education. We have some problems and some specific problems that they can lead into an impact, a huge impact in Brazilians in 20, 30, 40 years, for example. I mean, these transportation, food, I mean, inequality is a huge problem. And I believe that before going into properly into education, I feel like I need to think in some structure that will allow kids and youngsters from small cities with 2 or 3, maybe 10,000 citizens. Here for Brazil it's almost if the city doesn't exist. So I mean, my idea for education is not to work directly on education, but in things that may allow students to go to meet properly education. This is my idea. Thank you for your question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Talano. It was a pleasure meeting you remotely, but it's even nicer meeting you in person. So you are welcome to come to Belo Horizonte again, and for us to have a big breakfast or a big lunch, probably together with Professor Lohange, who will also this year be coming to Brazil. It will be a great pleasure again to receive Professor Lohange, which is a great friend, a friend from the heart, and great colleague.
I believe differently, Lorena. I mean, I have already met Belo Horizonte, but you haven't met Fortaleza with me. And Professor Lohange, je sais pas si vous avez déjà été à Fortaleza.
Pas encore.
C'est incroyable. C'est différent. And I will be delighted to have you here in our commission here in Ceará and to talk about international law. Here we have a lot of French speakers, sorry, and we have a lot of interest students here. So it will be very nice if I could receive you here, Fortaleza, anytime.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, Professor, you may come here to Minas Gerais first, then we go on the beach, right? We go for the beach. We go there, we talk about international law, we study a little bit, but mainly to the beach, right? That's it. Thank you very much, Professor Lohange, for inviting me again for this.
Thank you.
For being the moderator of this panel. Careers outside Europe has shown vibrant possibilities for students, researchers, and we have been throughout the years receiving and welcoming so exquisite professionals, attorneys, professors, researchers, students as well, who has spoken in this panel. And Professor Atalano, I believe, is a very eminent one throughout those years because it's very young and has been exposed to so many experiences. So I think this is the object of this panel, to showing students how to promote themselves, how to be brave, how not to give up, and how to try to expand their horizons throughout not only their world in academia, their current location, but trying to expand their horizons around the globe, and especially to South America, which is a very good place not only to live, but to work as well. We have our problems. Professor Artellano is right. We have several problems, but that's one of the reasons why we need professionals, good professionals, to be here with us to discuss our issues and to give us inputs in our democracy, to give us inputs and to help we deal with so many heterogeneous communities in one country with so many issues, which is also a very, I mean, being Brazilian, I can say it's a very good country to live, and I'm very proud to be Brazilian as well. So thank you very much. I believe we will meet again in ENE Brazil, Professor Artellano. It's been a project we have been talking about, myself and Professor Lahange, to expand ENE to Brazil, and expanding ENE to Brazil as a partner university, as Dom Helder being a partner university. We will have an ENE Brazil hosted by Dom Helder, probably in the next semester, and it will be a great pleasure to have you here in loco, to have you here in person to talk to our students, researchers, professors, attorneys, and employers in the legal market as well. So thank you very much, Professor Lahange. I hope to receiving you here in Brazil very soon. Thank you very much for all of those who watched and all of those who will be watching Careers Outside Europe. It's a pleasure. We see each other very soon. Thank you very much. And I close the panel, Careers Outside Europe.